Welcome to Life in Sirens, Behind and on the Scene, a podcast by first responders. We're your hosts, Sophie,
Jamie,
and Aubrey.
The content provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policies or positions of any medical institutions, emergency medical services, or healthcare organizations. Patient privacy is a top priority, and all discussions involving real-world emergency situations are de-identified and altered to ensure confidentiality. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional or your local EMS protocols before making any decisions regarding patient care or medical practices. Listener discretion is advised, as some topics may include discussions of real-world emergency situations.
Welcome to another episode of Life in Sirens. We are excited to talk about a more lighthearted topic this week, which is myths in EMS and medical in general. Kind of the things we see on TV or we might have preconceived notions of just based on like pop culture and things like that. So let's get into it.
So I think the biggest myth in EMS, and we still hear it all the time, are that paramedics are just ambulance drivers, or that we're referred to as an ambulance driver. We do occasionally drive the ambulance, which is pretty fun because lights and sirens. But the title paramedic comes with a lot of other responsibilities and skill scope. Another common myth is that paramedics and EMTs are the same thing. They are not. Those are actually two different licensure levels, and where we are in the state of Tennessee, there are actually 6 different EMS licensure levels. So there is EMR, EMT Basic, an AEMT, which stands for Advanced EMT, a paramedic, a critical care paramedic, and then a community paramedicine paramedic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're going with that. That's a new thing.
All right. Cool. Yeah.
Community paramedicine paramedic.
So in that order that I just said those, you get more of a scope with skills that you're allowed to perform, medicines that you're allowed to give with each one of those. So it is slightly offensive.
I personally just think everyone, if you're going to label someone a title in EMS, just probably go with paramedic. It would be like mislabeling a doctor like a tech. Or something.
Paramedic and AEMT
equate.
Okay.
Doctor to nurse.
Doctor to nurse, yeah.
Yeah, that's like the easiest way to,
Explain it.
explain it. But I feel like it could be similar to, like, calling a trauma surgeon an ER doctor.
Yeah.
Like, both have a valuable skill set, but one person spent, like, 8 more years in school trying to get theirs. So I feel like when you, like, our licensure levels, it's not a comment on value, it's just a comment on education.
Yeah. On effort, yeah.
Yeah.
That you've already put in.
Like, I feel like nurses get grumpy about this. Like, if you call an RN an LPN.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I would say that would be the equivalent.
Yeah, they get grumpy. And it's not because that they don't think that licensure holds value. It's just because
they worked hard.
They worked hard to get a different one.
Yeah.
My absolute least favorite myth comes from shows. And anytime that you see a show where somebody needs an ambulance or is being treated by a crew, they will always get them on the stretcher very fast, throw them on there, run. Everyone's running.
Run? Why is everyone running?
That's part one of this myth, is that we do not run.
We don't run.
We don't run. I will fall. I will hurt myself, and we will all end up in the same hospital together. Probably a lot slower than if I would have just walked. So we don't run. 2, anytime they'll get him on the stretcher, they throw him on there, they bring him to the ambulance, they hook the stretcher to the back of the truck because there's a little hook where you attach that bad boy, and then they stop and they will proceed to do every single intervention hooked to the back of the truck, out in the snow. One of the Chicago shows is like notorious for this. They'll just be in the snow, just being like, "Sir, we're going to save your life." Needle decompressing.
I'm freezing to death.
Doing crazy things.
Yeah,
and
I don't give a
it's
fuck about
only
hypothermia
because
and dramas.
Right, that show was like filming inside box too hard. Don't want to. And I watched it. Y'all can do it.
I watched it do a great job.
But that's my least favorite thing. I'm always like, no one does it. Why would you do that?
Yeah,
There is no reason.
there is
no reason.
There is no reason.
Your patient deserves some privacy.
No one needs to see anybody's bits.
No.
Speaking of loading and going, they always just be running to the truck, throwing them in there, and speeding off. And they always go lights and sirens to the
Every
hospital.
time.
We do
Yes.
not. We rarely go lights and sirens when we're transporting. Even when things are a little precarious. Like, it's much safer for all of us if we go no lights and sirens. And when they arrive at the hospital, this is mine. This is my pet peeve in TV shows, when the doctors just meet you in the ambulance bay at the hospital.
Yeah, that is
No.
so far from the truth.
Every time.
In the TV shows, they meet you in the ambulance bay and immediately, right then and there, take over whatever intervention it is
Yeah.
that you're doing. It's almost always CPR
Or bagging.
or bagging. And I will tell you right now, at least the physicians that we work with do not know how to walk and bag.
Oh, no.
Like, nobody teaches you that if that's not your job. But like, no one knows that. But in the shows, they will jump on the stretcher. They'll do on the move CPR. They are on the move bagging. And I'm like, no one does that in real life.
Speaking of interventions, this is notoriously on TV shows as well.
Yeah, it is.
There'll be a patient laying in a hospital bed. They'll look up at the monitor. It'll be a flat line, asystole, and they will say, "Get the paddles," and they will defibrillate, asystole.
And immediately the
They are
monitor
alive.
will go,
Dink.
beep, 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 beep.
And the patient will... Also, how many times in medical dramas do you have the patient immediately wake up?
Yes, people will be in cardiac arrest and then just be alive, like
Yes.
conscious.
It'll be like, wow, that was crazy. Thank
That
you for
was crazy.
defibrillating
You saved
me
my life.
with those paddles.
And we don't use paddles.
No.
No.
We use pads.
So for those of you not in healthcare, you've probably seen the traditional paddles that you hold in your hands, and they lube them up and they press them to the skin and they defibrillate the patient. We do not use those. We use sticky giant rectangles that have
Yep.
electrical wires that run through them, and they do have the gel, but we do not have to place anything. We just pull them off of the adhesive and we just stick them right on the patient, and we do not touch the patient usually for any reason.
Nope.
Clear.
Just big old stickers.
Here's one that is weird. Ambulances can't treat kids. I feel like I've heard, right? I feel like I've heard that like around and about before. That like, oh, but like, can you take kids? It's not almost always in a question.
Yeah,
Can you take kids? I'm like, oh, yes.
we take kids all the time.
As a matter of fact,
We certainly can. Is it a joy? Is it something that I'm like super duper thrilled to do? No, it's not. Do I participate in the transporting of children? Absolutely, yes.
legally have to. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
We do have pediatric equipment. We have pediatric devices that secure the patient appropriately to our stretchers. We often, if it's an emergency with a kid, we go fast.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is also a little known fact. Most seats in ambulances will
Oh,
fold
yeah.
down into a car seat.
Oh
like,
yeah.
I don't think I've ever been in an ambulance that doesn't have that.
The
That must be,
captain's
like, a
chair.
mandate.
This is not necessarily a myth, but I have always wondered why there is a chair in the ambulance called a CPR chair, because nobody sits doing CPR.
Yeah, but I think that's where they always stand when you're doing compressions.
Right, but like, why is the chair called CPR chair?
Because it's the position. I mean, you kind of need a little alcove so you can stand over there.
Yeah.
Because think about also when you defibrillate and you're standing outside, you kind of have to get in the CPR chair.
You
Yeah,
do,
you
you're
kinda
right.
Gotta jump up.
I always wondered, like, if one person's supposed to be standing and doing CPR, and then that's where the person on deck is supposed to sit, like, curled up in a little ball behind the other one.
I would like to see it.
Just one fireman
no, get away.
crouched like a gargoyle in the CPR chair waiting for his turn to
Just
start
waiting to pounce.
compressions. That'd be amazing.
You know what I used to love a lot? Whenever we did not have the Lucas devices and we would have to switch off doing CPR, the firefighters would like beg each other to swap out. They would be like begging to take over.
Yeah, they did.
My
Loved
favorite is,
it.
you good, man? You got it, man? You good,
For
man?
sure? Like we can switch. Are you good? You sure?
There was some good teamwork.
Maybe they got to like skip working out if they did compressions or something.
That
Someone
would've
answer
been-
that for me.
Yeah, I need answers. I mean, I know that's my logic. I don't know if it's theirs.
That's our EMS logic.
Yeah. really has not pandered well now that we have Lucas devices.
And auto loads. I am turning into a weak little human.
I know. Sometimes I miss having the manual stretcher because I was strong. And I was just talking about this on a TikTok. I used to have to stand on my tiptoes because I'm short to get the height to get the stretcher in and out, especially by myself. And my calves, so
Impressive.
strong. They're still looking good, but I'm nervous I'm going to lose them.
There will be times where when we were in the spare and we didn't have an auto load, we talked about it because I was like, why does everything hurt?
Yeah.
It's because we were loading it, and I just appreciated that workout.
You know, whenever I first got engaged, my jeweler said, "Do you do CrossFit?" And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Your ring is scratched like you lift barbells." And I was like, "Oh, it's from the stretcher." I did not work out. Oh, speaking of cardiac arrest, one thing that we often perform in cardiac arrest is an interosseous access, which is performed with a drill. And I think a lot of people who are not in medicine don't realize we have drills that drill into people's bones. They don't have to be in cardiac arrest. If we cannot obtain access and we need emergency access to their vasculature, we can still drill them. We provide a lidocaine medication when we flush that to try to mediate some of the pain. It's still very painful. We're typically not using them in that scenario, but we can drill into bones. We usually use the long bones like the tibia or the humerus. If you don't have a drill, you have a horrifying device that's also named a horrifying thing called a jamshidi.
Oh.
And it is a manual push down and crank onto an extremity to obtain this interosseous access. So we do prefer the drill. It is much less barbaric.
I have a legit reoccurring nightmare about a jamshidi, and it is that I measure it based off the baby toe, but then I can't get it to stay where I measured it, and it just repeatedly is the wrong length.
Ashley and I actually had a patient who had no complaints after a motor vehicle accident, and they said, "Well, I'm going to go with you because I'll get seen faster."
It's my least favorite ambulance myth.
Yep, mine too. Because it is very not true. You still get triaged the exact same way, and we do take people to the waiting room every single day.
Every single
Yeah.
day.
If your response to "I will go with you because it's faster," consider that you're taking a resource away from somebody that genuinely needs it in a life-threatening situation.
Another myth, I guess misconception would be a better word, is they don't understand there's not like hundreds of ambulances in a city. Most of the cases, that is untrue.
Yes, like ambulances are planned based off of your population concentrations, and they're spaced out, but I think people think that the ambulance closest to them is always there.
Right.
And so if there's an ambulance that is 2 minutes from you, that's great, unless they're on another call. And then the closest ambulance to you may be 20 minutes away. Like there's not just
Unless they're on a call.
Yeah, there's not just an unlimited resource. And I think that when people call for non-emergencies, they think like, oh, but there's another one, so it's not a big deal.
I definitely think that's some food for thought. In some cases, a lot of agencies, like ours and bordering counties, have contracts with other agencies so that when they run out, because they will, and they have, and they do, run out of ambulances, that county responds from their county to your emergency. So that's a pretty hefty, in a lot of cases, response time. So,
Yeah, we're talking counties, not cities.
right. If you feel like you're having an emergency, call 911.
But being ill,
Having the
just
flu.
feeling sick, let's consider if that's truly life-threatening. I feel like a very common misconception or myth is that every fire station has an ambulance.
Yeah, that's true.
And in some services that's the case, but in ours it's not. Our fire departments don't have ambulances. Each fire department runs different level of like medical response, but none of them have ambulances. And so it's funny when people are like, I'm driving to the fire station.
A lot of times
And our dispatch is like, pull over so our ambulance can come to you. And they're like, no, I'm driving to
I'm
a fire
almost there.
station. And they're like, that is further away from any ambulance
Yes.
that is trying to get you.
and they're gonna call us. But you know what my favorite station is in our service? We work with the city, and the city fire station, like their prettiest station, has a slide. Instead of a fire pole, there's a slide.
Also, be careful on that slide. You will get wrecked.
I have gone down it, and it is so fast.
Yes.
I don't even, like, honestly, I feel like it's, like,
more dangerous than the fire pole?
Yes.
Yes. The first time I went down that, nobody was like, hey, James, keep your hand, like, on the center pole of the slide.
They did tell me that.
Because it will do you a yeet.
Yeah.
And,
turns out.
It'll flip you right around.
Yes,
and my
turns
radio
out
got
you
caught.
will-
It was a disaster. I can't imagine being half asleep. One more. Ambulances do not drive slow because they are too heavy.
Oh, because this is a thing people don't know, because our ambulances are governed.
We're on the interstate and we're going lights and sirens. We're governed at 86 miles an hour. So if you want to go faster than that, get over, like, 2 or 3 lanes and go faster over there. Because I have to drive in the left lane because people are supposed to move to the right. So if I am not on the left, it gets big confusing for everybody. And it makes it a lot harder for me to merge to the right when I try to go to an exit. I hate driving emergency traffic on the interstate.
Yeah, me too.
But if you're just trying to get somewhere faster and you're going to ride an ambulance's butt while we're going down the interstate, just know that sometimes there's hazards in front of us or people don't get over and we have to slam on our brakes. And if you fly your car into the patient compartment of our ambulance and murder my partner and my patient, I'm going to be really mad.
Also, for the record, ambulances, the box part, we often call the back of the ambulance, the patient compartment, the box, is essentially like plywood and sheet metal.
Yeah, that's it.
They fold.
They blow up.
Yeah.
They will just...
not a safe place to be.
Yeah, the only place that you are really safe in the back of that truck is in the captain's chair because it is mounted to the frame, and on the stretcher because oftentimes the stretcher mount is mounted to the frame.
But I think the real reason that we don't go fast is because we are the only emergency vehicle ever that has to do their job in the back of the vehicle while it's moving.
We're standing up doing hard things.
Does everyone remember the time that I headbutted a firefighter, but it wasn't his head, it was his crotch?
Yeah.
While doing CPR.
Whoopsie.
That's when we still transported CPRs.
Yeah. And you get ambulance legs after a while, but
Yeah.
if you've ever been a new hire that I have trained as an FTO, you have had a lecture about centrifugal force and how accelerating while you are in a curve is going to throw your partner into the wall. And we all have to learn how to turn more gingerly when you're driving an ambulance and someone's standing.
Even when you're not going emergency, please be gentle when you accelerate, when you slow down, if we're doing critical interventions in the back. One skill I think you learn, especially as a paramedic, is drawing up drugs while we're going emergency or while we're transporting a patient and we're in Tennessee and our roads are terrible. That is a skill. Man.
The amount of
we've got
times
it,
the amount of times that you're going down, like, oh gosh, if you're on 440
Oh, Lord help you if you're on 440.
and you try to drop a med, I have been very scared of almost stabbing myself many a time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a skill that you have to figure out.
You
You really got to try to bridge the needle shaking and the bottle shaking together.
You just gotta secure that thing to your hand real hard. I think people just think we just load them up and turn our lights on, and I've had this happen a lot of times. People ask me, why aren't we going with the lights and sirens?
Oh, have you ever had family members show up and yell at you because you didn't go emergency traffic, or you're sitting in the driveway doing things, and they will knock on the door and be like, what are you doing?
Man, there's laws. Oh, are we gonna go?
Yeah, I've started when family members come out to the truck and are like, is everything okay? What's going on? Before that happens, when we're about to go and like they're going to follow us or whatever, I like give them rundown of everything that we've done. Like, we did this, we did this, we did this, we gave them this, we did this. And now we're going.
I usually tell the family before I even leave the house. I'm like, we're going to go to the truck, we're going to do some
We're
things.
going to do some things.
I
And
have
then we're
started
gonna go to
doing
the
that.
hospital.
Yeah.
Because they will. They'll sit in their car. It'll be like 5 minutes or so. And then they will get out and they'll stare at you through the back door.
Or they just knock, and you're like starting an IV, and they're knocking on the door, and they just
Yeah.
keep knocking on the door. I'm like, I have a needle in your loved one's arm.
Yeah, everybody
moment, please.
calm down.
One moment, please.
And I think we've all said the line, we have some things to do. This isn't just a taxi.
Right. And
And the patient will look at you and be like, What?
And it's much safer for us to do those things for you as the patient and as the provider before we start driving. In what world is it safer to not be buckled in? What world is it safer to be riding backwards? Like, none of this is really ideal.
Yes. And there's a difference between being capable of doing those things. Like, I am very capable of doing all of the interventions within my
Absolutely.
scope while transporting.
And we do all the time,
But sometimes it's not necessary.
What does Sophie always say? Do not take unnecessary risks.
do not take unnecessary risks. Don't. There's no reason. I don't want to end up in the back of an ambulance. Thank you very much.
To be fair, you've only said that to us when we were like on top of a mountain hiking or out in the
Well,
wilderness.
somebody's got to make sure that we get down from that mountain.
I know, and you
See?
always do. We've always made it in one piece.
Wendy Gale, we
Well-
have Sophie with us.
I usually just remain at the bottom so that I can call for help when you inevitably need it.
And we appreciate
One
that.
day.
More than you'll ever know.
One day you're going to be like, see?
I told you. Yes. One day we'll talk about all of our mountainous adventures that have gotten into some wild situations, which if you look at our podcast art, that is why we're around a campfire and backed up the ambulance to our campfire, because not that we've done that before, but it would be pretty cool. But
Honestly, that would be
that's
ideal.
kind of our vibe. Yeah, our vibe is EMS and the outdoors. I will say there's a lot that we can do in the back of an ambulance. So much. We are very capable, especially in modern EMS. But we cannot do everything. So sometimes we do just have to go to the hospital, and just because we're not doing many interventions and things like that doesn't mean your loved one isn't sick or needing emergency care. We'll give a stroke call, for example.
Yeah.
Like, really, we start lines, we make sure the airway stays patent, and we monitor vitals and we go to the hospital. Like, there's a lot of scenarios where the intervention that needs to be performed to save the patient's life is not something we can do. So if we are just sitting there monitoring vital signs and things like that, it does not mean that we don't want to do anything. There's just maybe an intervention that's not possible to happen in an ambulance yet.
There's a decent amount of calls, too, where the complaint is emergent, and there's not a lot of things that we can do intervention-wise, but the most value that you get from EMS is that we have already done an assessment. We've already identified said issue, and that can help to expedite your care in the ER.
Right.
With things like strokes, that there's not much for us to do. Heart attacks, sometimes there's not much for us to do. Things like that. The ER doesn't have to spend time trying to figure out what is wrong with you. They can like start treating you. So sometimes that's where the value is.
For any non-medical listeners, I just want to say this. A heart attack does not equal cardiac arrest. I think a lot of times they say that in medical dramas.
Yeah.
A heart attack, or what we call a STEMI, can lead to cardiac arrest. But when someone has a cardiac arrest, that does not mean they had a heart attack.
No. We had a patient that told us that they were hyperglycemic and it directly led to multiple cardiac arrests. There's a lot of misconception around cardiac arrest, and honestly, I think it is not necessarily people's fault. I think it is the information that gets put out there. Because even think about when we take required classes, and it is like 52% of people die from cardiac arrest. I'm like, 100% of people die from cardiac arrest.
The definition of death.
Every single human being that has ever died has died of cardiac arrest. Now, there may be different causes, but it's my biggest pet peeve is when they are like, it can be reversed so that they don't die. No, they are dead.
Other medical things.
Yeah, cardiac arrest
Cause
means that
cardiac
you
arrest.
are actually right now dead. It does not mean that we're not going to try to reverse said death, but it does mean that you are clinically deceased.
I always am very intrigued when a patient has let me know that they have suffered cardiac arrest, because I'm like, how are you alive? Because it's very unlikely that you're going to survive a cardiac arrest.
Yes, at this
especially outside
point,
of a hospital.
yes, and at this point, I want to know all the details.
Yes, I need to know everything. That's an extreme medical history.
Yeah,
I feel like when most people say that and they're like being legitimate about it, it's during surgery.
Right.
Which
yeah.
then I'm like, okay, yeah.
well,
that's
yeah,
fine.
yeah, and there's a couple people
I
that I've
think
had that have been like,
almost doesn't count.
Yeah.
right, that have been like, I survived a cardiac arrest, and I was like, oh,
On the OR
when? And they were on the table in the OR during a cardiac procedure. And so then, I mean, still legitimate. However, you are in quite literally the best place that you could ever be in
Right.
to suffer a cardiac
Or
arrest.
people suffer cardiac arrest during cath lab procedures.
Yeah.
Like, they are.
There is nowhere
They
else.
shock you immediately.
There is nowhere else that you would want to be, and that happened to you.
I want to talk about a misconception. Just because you take a medication that corrects your medical condition does not mean you do not have medical history. Please provide us with any and all medical history that you have.
Bro.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Because some medications can be used for multiple things. Let's take propranolol. It can be used for heart rate, blood pressure, anxiety. I mean, meds can be used for a lot of things. Sometimes we can deduce. But I just want you to know that if you do take a medication, you do have medical history.
Yes.
That does count. Yeah.
Yes. That is my favorite grandpa. No, darling. There ain't nothing wrong with me. And I say, okay, well, you take lisinopril. What's that for? You take metformin. What's that for? And they're like, yeah, but I don't have, they're fine now.
Yeah.
'Cause
I
I
used
take-
to be a diabetic.
Because I take medicine now. I said, no. You still have hypertension.
It's still there.
You still have it.
Also, another thing that I want to talk about. Aspirin is not a blood thinner. Aspirin is a platelet anti-aggregator.
Aspirin is an anti-platelet alligator.
Okay. It is not. The point is, it is not a blood thinner, and you are safe.
You're safe.
It's not warfarin.
One of my least favorite things when nursing staff will say, do they take any blood thinners? And I will say, yes, they take Plavix.
Yeah, they're like,
Because I know that technically
But it's an
Plavix is not a
extreme.
thinner, but it will increase your likelihood to have a brain bleed if you fall on
you
it.
do have to stop it before surgery.
Yeah. And they will sass me every time. That's not a blood thinner. I said, do you still want to know that they take it? Yes, you do.
So those are all the misconceptions and myths that we have time for today. I would love to hear your comments, so please comment down below of what some misconceptions or myths that you have heard or experienced in EMS are. Apparently I have a list, but I say myths.
Myths.
So I'm sorry about that. But thank you for listening. This has been another episode of Life in Sirens podcast. And please follow us on our socials, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a lot of others if you check out our RSS feed, which is linked in our link tree. I also want to let you guys know before you go to please submit any questions you have or topics that you would like to hear during our fireside chat episode. We would like to hit a lot more topics that you guys are interested in. Be safe. See you later.
This has been Life in Sirens, produced by 3 nerds trying to bring you content that you might actually care about.